Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's 6 o'clock and time to start the first ever Krakow, UX Writers Krakow online meetup. It would be great to hear if you can actually hear me, if you want to give me some sign of that. So I'm super excited to be here and really happy that you want to join as well. So thank you for that. We have a pretty full agenda, so I will start by quickly going through what you can expect. First of all, we are recording this session and it may be distributed publicly later, so be aware of that. So what I'm doing now is the welcome and intro. And who am I? I spend most of my week at Making Waves, an IT consultancy in Krakow. I also work for the UX Writing Hub, and I do some freelance translations. As you can see on the screen, I have some bad news. Unfortunately, Wojtek has come down with the flu and he won't be joining us tonight. I'm really sad about that. I was very much looking forward to his presentation too. But of course, his health is the priority here. And on the plus side, we can look forward to hearing his presentation at the next occasion instead. So for those who don't know Wojtek, he is actually the first person in Poland who offered UX writing training in Polish. So that's really cool. And he's already had 120 students. So this means that I will kick off instead with my presentation with the cryptic title, The Genius Vision of a Polish Designer. I will then hand over to Pieterjan, who is my colleague at Making Waves and also a mentor for UX Writing Hub. And I can't think of a better person than Pieterjan to hold this presentation because he knows more languages at an advanced level than anyone else I know. It's pretty cool. He will talk about how to make your UX content translation friendly. Then we have Nina, who will share her experience from content marketing and how that relates to UX writing. So really looking forward to that as well. My own background is partly translation and partly content marketing, so that would be really interesting. You can also find Nina on Medium, where she has lots of articles on content marketing. That's really interesting. And finally, we have Kalina, who will speak about psychology and UX writing, which I think is really relevant and useful for all of us. You may know Kalina has already written, I would say, extensively on this subject. Lots of very interesting articles on Medium, so check that out as well. I'm really curious to hear what she will share with us tonight. After the presentations, we will have time for questions and answers. So if you want to, you can use the chat function during our sessions to send in your questions, and then at the end we will go through them, as many as we can. So that's it, and then you will have Pieterjan saying goodbye. Before I start, I just have 3 things I want to say. First of all, there are no stupid questions. UX writing is still a fairly new discipline, so in a way we are all beginners and we can all contribute. Number 2, this is not a session about the English language or grammar or pronunciation. Most of us communicate here in our second language, so there is really no need to worry about that either. And finally, we would love to know what you think about this session and if you have any suggestions for future meetups. So this time we ended up with this format of a few short presentations, and I'm sure that's an option for future sessions as well. I think there are many other ways we can do it too. Maybe we want to have fewer but longer presentations. Maybe we want to invite someone from someone external to hold a talk or have a workshop. Maybe we want to have smaller groups with more discussions. So it's really up to us. So yeah, we will distribute a feedback form after the session in the Facebook group. So feel free to use that. And finally, thank you very much, Making Waves, for lending us the Pro Zoom account. And especially thank you, Pavel Midvo, our business manager, who is here tonight as the Zoom master person. Okay, that's it. So what is this vision I'm talking about, and who is the Polish designer? So his name is Michał Malewicz. He's based in Warsaw. I'm really curious if you know this guy already and what he does. If you do, feel free to raise your hand. It would just be interesting to see. So I will talk a little bit about him and his work towards the end, but I will jump straight into this particular solution that he presented about a year ago in a blog article. And it has to do with the Polish annual tax form. We are all familiar with this or similar form, and for many of us, this is a source of some distress, maybe even anxiety. For sure, I've never met anyone who looks forward to filling in this form. Even though it is now available electronically, the online version is pretty much the same as the paper version. So what Michał did was to ask himself, is there a better way we can handle this form? And his suggestion is, instead of a traditional form, how about if we let a chatbot guide the user through the whole tax return step by step? So the article is available on Medium. It's called Tax Forms as a Chatbot. And in the article, he goes into some detail about how this could work and what it would look like. So let me show you a few examples from the article. So as you can see, the idea is to guide the user step by step, and you will only see one relevant question at a time. So something like this. Hi, I'm TaxBot. I'll be happy to help you with this. Ready to begin? Yes. What is your name? Thank you. Give me a minute to check. Great news. I have identified you as Mike Malevich. Is that right? And so on. So there are so many advantages with this format. For one, you will never be distracted by all the fields that don't actually apply to you. And one thing that particularly grabbed my attention in the article is that he said the most important thing here is the copy. It has to be conversational. It has to be clear. And of course, there will be lots of challenges to make this actually happen. One is that the form itself is very complex, and I'm sure it's not super easy to make sure that the chatbot does a good job. There will be cases when people have to be referred to a human agent, at least in the beginning. Another challenge, of course, would be to persuade the tax office that this is worth investing in. But having said that, it's possible, yeah, the technology is in place. And it's just such a great example of how a different design could make a huge difference to actually most of the adult population. And also the actual TaxBot technology, it's not super complex. However, why is this relevant for UX writers? Because chatbot writing is not actually UX writing, it's conversation design. That's true, but I think they are closely related. I would call them maybe cousins. And so people who are now getting into UX writing will be in a good position to transition to chatbot writing in the future if they want to. And if chatbot technology is about to take off in the way some people think it will, then there will be a lot of job opportunities there. So I think it's just, it's super cool, yeah, that it shows the potential of UX copy, or if we call it copy-driven digital solutions, and all the wonderful things that we can contribute as writers. And the other thing I think is so cool is that the relevance goes way beyond this text form in his examples. It could apply to any other complex forms that we encounter in public institutions. There are many similar forms in the Foreign Office, for example. And maybe there are similar complex forms in private corporations, and why not for tax office in other countries? Yeah, I'm sure Poland is not the only country which has this kind of form. So that was the vision. Whether you agree that it's genius or not, I think it's super cool. And actually just the fact that he sat down and worked on this without being commissioned by anyone. Yeah, really nice. So let's talk a little bit about Michał Malewicz and what else he has done. So he is a designer. As far as I know, he co-founded the company hypefor.com in Warsaw together with his wife, Diana. And they also wrote a book together called Designing User Interfaces. He has a YouTube channel about UX and design. He created this YouTube channel during the lockdowns earlier this year. And there's a lot of really good stuff there as well. And he has tons of articles on Medium. So as you can see, he's incredibly productive. And if anyone is interested, one of his articles is called How I Increased My Productivity by 200%. And in this article, he makes 3 main points, I would say. The first one is to only check social media and email at set times during the day, maybe midday and afternoon. His other tip is to use to-do lists every day or every other day. And finally, to give yourself gratification when you have completed a task. So, like many people, I think, who constantly produce things and publish things, not everything he does is great, maybe, but I think that's okay, because that's just how some people function and how they prefer to work. And in any case, he has written a few articles recently that I think are very relevant also for UX writers, even though they are about UX design more. So let's talk a little bit about those. So around 1 year ago, he published an article called UX has bad UX. And in October this year, he followed up with another article called UX still has pretty bad UX. And so he's quite critical about the direction UX is taking in general at the moment. And of course, we may agree with this or not. Maybe we even feel offended, I don't know, but I think it's really worth listening to the criticisms, because if we take in his points, then we are in a good position to meet them, yeah? And it's a way to stay relevant also for UX writing. So here's a summary of his 3 main points. The first one is that too many chefs spoil the stew. He thinks the whole UX process sometimes is way too inefficient because there are just so many people involved doing different things. Researchers, analysts, strategies, UI designers, UX designers, product owners, etc. And of course, we can add UX writers to that as well. The process has become too long-winded and overcomplicated, let's say. His second point is that there is a lack of design with too much research, too many workshops, too long workshops, too much talking and not enough doing. He thinks one of the main problems with today's design is that there's not enough design going on. And finally, he thinks there is a tendency towards focusing too much on data and not enough on people. And maybe a kind of lack of common sense as well. If we listen too much to data, then yeah, maybe we forget what is behind the data. You know, it's true that numbers don't lie, but at the same time, it's hard to read any emotion and the emotional state of people from just the numbers as well. So his remedies here is he has 3 suggestions. The first one is to stop wasting clients' time. And he means like we should think twice about what kind of research we recommend to our clients. Maybe not every project needs a lot of personas. Maybe there is existing research that we can reuse, keep workshops to a minimum, and just think about what actually makes sense for each individual project. The other thing he proposes is that designers should learn both UX and UI. So we should aim for more overlapping skills. So either a UX aware graphic designer or a UI trained UX designer, for example. And finally, we should be careful to treat both users and customers as people and not data points. So his conclusion in all this is to actually get rid of UX and just call it design. Radical. And again, we may not agree with it, but his point is that UX should be an integral part of design. Yeah, and not a separate discipline. So I think that was really interesting. Also thinking about how UX writing relates to all this. And this leads me to my last slide, which is maybe we can invite him actually to one of our meetups. I think it would be really interesting to hear his view about the future of UX and how he sees the role of writing and copy as part of the design process. Because except for the article about the chatbot and the tax forms, he doesn't say so much about content and copy in digital products. So it makes me wonder if he thinks that designers should also learn UX writing and how that would work. And of course, we often hear that UX writers should learn more about design tools and design thinking. That makes perfect sense to me. But at the same time, I wonder if it's realistic to think that every designer can master UX, UI, and copy all at the same time. I don't know. Something to think about. So that's all I had to say today. Thank you for listening. I will now stop sharing my screen and hand over to Pieterjan, who will talk about translation and localization.
Yes, thanks, Anja. Wait just a second. I'm going to share my screen here. All right, thanks a lot. Hi everyone. So my name is Pieterjan. As Anja already mentioned, I also work for Making Waves. I'm a content strategist, UX writer. I'm originally from Belgium, but I've been living here in Krakow for already 2.5 years. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can make your UX content localization friendly. I'm not only going to talk about what you can do with the text specifically, but also which conversations you can have, which aspects that you need to look after from on an early stage, and maybe design and maybe discuss with your design or development colleagues, just to get a smooth workflow also for the localized version of a digital product. So quickly, the agenda. First, I'm going to talk a bit about what localization is. Then some language-related aspects on how to make the UX copy localization friendly. Then some cultural and more contextual aspects. And I'm going to finish talking a little bit about why UX writers and localization experts should actually work more closely together. So first of all, what is localization? Well, it is the process of adapting content to the needs of a specific country or region. For many people, localization is synonymous with translation, but translation is just one aspect, and it's not always an aspect of localization, because there are also many other aspects involved, such as the cultural context of that specific country or region. So localization can also happen within the same language, or between two varieties of the same language, right? A UK English product can be localized into US English. It will still be the same language, but maybe some references here and there, or things that do not really make sense for a US audience will be changed slightly. And I'm going to take these three aspects and zoom in a little bit on each of those to and discuss a few aspects what you can actually do. So I'm going to try to make this a little practical, so you can all of you can have a few takeaways from this talk. So first, some language-related aspects. What you can do to make your copy localization friendly. First of all, you need to bear in mind that, well, for those of you who work in English, who work on a digital product in English, and I think some of you probably some of you probably might. English is quite a compact language as such. So just translating English to another language, such as German or Romance languages, just by doing the translation, you will get a much longer text, because the language is just longer. And that can obviously create some problems in design when you have, for example, a button in an interface. Let's say the word edit in English, right? Edit is only 4 letters, but if you translate that, I don't think many other verbs in the languages I mentioned here will only be 4 letters long. So you need to talk to your designer and make your designer aware. Okay, when you design that button, make sure it's big enough that for localization there won't be any problem. And I added a few screenshots here of my own Instagram profile in 3 languages, in English, in Polish, and in Spanish. And you can see the labels post, followers, and following. There's no problem there. But then in Polish, it becomes a little tricky. Obserwujących is apparently too long. And in Spanish, 2 out of 3 are already too long. So Instagram there didn't really take a localization first approach. So yeah, that was character expansion. A second thing that you should also discuss with design and or development colleagues is formatting, because every market or every country or culture or whatever you want to call it has different ways of formatting certain types of information. And here on the map, you can see the different formats of how in different countries dates are written. Today is the 2nd of November. So in most of Europe, that will be 02/11/2020. But in the US, that will be 11/02, which is for us quite confusing, but they think obviously the same. But it is something that that you should bear in mind and should flag, or something that should be flagged rather early on, because this can definitely cause confusion amongst users. And date is not the only thing. Also, for example, currency currency symbols, the way or the position where you put them. If you have, for example, an e-commerce or let's say some kind of digital product with a field, with a text field where the user needs to add a number or an amount of money. In most of the EU, the euro sign follows the amounts that the amount of money, except for the Netherlands, Ireland, and Malta. There, it comes before you mention the amount of money. So yeah, it's not a big deal. It's maybe not such a big deal, but I mean, it's just to be correct, right? It's just to be correct in the market, and also that the users don't get frustrated by tiny details like that. That also works for other symbols. I've heard a few weeks ago, apparently in Hebrew and Arabic, which, as you probably all know, you read from right to left, the percentage symbol comes in a different position. So that's also something you need to bear in mind if you would work with a Middle Eastern language or with Middle Eastern markets. And also numbers, of course. Do you use spaces to group groups, to group digits or 3 digits within a number? Do you use commas, points? What do they mean? It can be all quite confusing if you don't bear that in mind, basically. And a third linguistic aspect that you should take into account is just the grammar of a foreign language. Languages are different. There are many, also in terms of grammar, they can have their quirks and funny things that might sound or that might be illogical for you. A good example, which is often used in the localization community, is the Polish language, obviously, because in English, you have one table, but if you have more than one table, it's always going to be table. But if you have jeden stół, and it's dwa stoły, 5 stołów, depending on the number you have, the case changes. And Polish is not the only language, there are more of those. But if the user, for example, needs to add, there's again a text field, and you need to add a number, and there is a word that changes, like hard-coded, for example, your developers need to be aware of that they should foresee these options, basically, when the interface gets localized. Same goes with the past tense. It doesn't matter who says that they confirm something. It will always be you confirmed, but in Polish, as you all know, it depends on the gender of the user. So let's say that there is a digital product, and the user needs to create a profile. He needs to give their gender, for example. In English, that is not a problem. There won't be many changes based on that. But in Polish, every time a past tense is used, the text throughout the interface needs to change, basically. And that can also be quite a bit of work. So it's good to think of that beforehand. And a third aspect is the syntax, meaning the word order. So what is a normal word order in the sentence for a given language? I put the words here, or the abbreviations SVO versus SOV, which stands for subject, verb, object, which, like English. In English, you say I eat cake, but in other languages, you're going to say I cake eat. So the verb comes at the end. And this becomes really problematic when an interface really imposes a certain word order to the user, actually. And you can see on the image here that it can be a big issue if you don't take the syntax of a given language that you want to localize into account. Because here, this one sentence, show all blog posts created more than 3 weeks ago. If you localize that to Japanese, then you need to switch everything around. And yeah, I mean, I don't even want to imagine how much work that was, how much time and frustration, especially that took to fix that. So, oh yeah, right. And this is actually, when we get back to the pluralization, this is how it looks like in the code. There are different values, as you can see, for the number 0, for number 1, 2, and then there's few, which is, in the case of Polish, few is 2, 3, or 4, but not 12, 13, and 14. And you can see that on the right-hand side, then you get piosenki. and all the other plurals you're going to get piosenek. So everything with a 5 or higher. Whereas in English, it is quite simple, as you can see on the right-hand side at the top image. One song was found, other songs, so only 2 options. And it's not only Polish, as I already mentioned. The number 2 is apparently special in Welsh and in Slovenian, as you can see left. And also in Maltese, there is something with large numbers, which can be very specific. But I mean, if you need to work, or if you need to create a Maltese version of something, it's good to have that in mind. As I already mentioned, languages is just one thing. The second thing is our more cultural and contextual aspects of localization. And a first topic that I want to touch upon is the use of figurative language. I'm talking about figures of speech, proverbs, pop culture references, language specific expressions. And the thing is, they can be highly culture specific, and also market specific. But those are also very often the aspects that really give a digital product its voice, its particular voice, and which makes it recognizable, which it really shows the brand of the product. So it can get a little tricky, because these can be really hard to localize. And basically, what we can do as UX writers to assist or to support localization experts is maybe to add some notes or some explanations for localization people, to say what the effect is that you would like to have from that type of copy. And then maybe the localization expert can come up with something that is in line with what you had in mind when writing this copy, basically. But yeah, it's never going to be a one-on-one the same. Obviously, that's just impossible. So it's about finding balance between clarity and still having enough voice. And in some places that are quite voice heavy, such as empty states, error messages, and confirmation messages, it doesn't harm that much. As you can see on the right-hand side, there is an empty state, bruce@wayne.com. In certain markets, maybe Bruce Wayne or Batman are not that well known. So but you can easily change this into you@mail.com, for example. So that's not a big problem here, but it's something to bear in mind. And then finally, when you localize a product, you don't only make it accessible for that market, it also starts to exist within that market, within that context. And sometimes there can be certain legal frameworks that apply in markets that do not apply in other markets. So you need to be aware of that. For example, when you have an e-commerce site, there might be some shipping regulations there, or some legal disclaimers that need to be added, or other disclaimers or other legal information that has to be mentioned in a product. And it's good to do that research beforehand, so that when designing the product, that can be included. That there's a space for that within the design, that it's flexible enough to include these types of information. The same goes with payment methods. We live in Europe, and every country has or can have their own online payment methods. As you can see on the right-hand side, we recognize obviously Blik, which we use here in Poland, but all the other ones are from many different countries all over Europe. And I'm sure the way that payments are made, or the different steps that all of these services use to secure the payments, are probably a little different. And also this needs to be well researched to make sure that the design accommodates these types of payment methods. And I mean, that's still quite important for business, that if you sell something, that you get paid for it, basically. Yeah, that was it, more or less. Just one more thing that I would like to touch upon is the fact that I actually think that UX writers and localization people should work quite closely together, or very closely together, because we are actually fighting similar battles. Also, localization people are not as early included in the process very often as they would like to. And they also have a very good, or they also know that that localization can have a real impact on design, on development, and being included very early on you can really avoid many problems or many challenges further down the road. And how can we do that? Well, by using some collaborative tools like Figma. Figma has a plugin for a software called Localize, which is a localization software, pretty self-explanatory. And when you make the translations in Localize, you have screenshots of the screen that you are translating for. So there is some context included there. And also, thanks to the plugin in Figma, with one click on the button, you can pull all the translations into your designs, and you can basically translate every screen or every piece of copy on the screen. And then you can start checking where there might be some design flaws or where some updates should be made. Another tool that might be a great collaboration tool actually for UX writers and localization professionals are copy docs. And copy docs are actually text documents that are basically archives of how the copy has come into existence of a certain screen. And you can see an example here on the right hand side. And those documents can contain some additional context, maybe an image of the screen that the copy is for, some research background, but also some copy explorations. You can see it here. So for an H1 or for a CTA, for example, some different versions that were that UX writers or designers had thought of beforehand, but eventually didn't select as the final version. But this could be really handy for localization people. For example, when they are dealing with character restrictions, those copy explorations can come in handy as an inspiration for them to think of an alternative version for the text that they need to localize. And then lastly, there are some companies that organize check-in meetings between design and localization, where designers present their screens, whatever they have been working on, and localization people just flag, okay, this header might not work in French, or this button might be problematic in German, or things like that. And then those problems are spotted very early on. They can be anticipated for, and yeah, there will be less problems down the road, basically. All right, that was it from me. Thanks a lot. I'm looking forward to the Q&A after all the presentations are done. And I'm going to hand it over to Nina now.
Hi, everyone. Elko Kraków. Can you hear me well? I hope yes. I will share my screen. Okay. Sorry. Nice. Okay, yes. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be a part of UX Writers community in Kraków still, even though I moved to Sopot about a month ago, but it's awesome to join your meetings, and I hope we'll see each other in person soon. I'm going to talk about UX tips for embracing content marketing, as I'm a content marketing manager at Traffic now. I'm a former brainy bee as Kalina and some other participants of the event, as I've noticed. So I'm happy also to talk about that. It all started for me when I realized that content marketing is seen as a very promotional thing, as a way to push your content, to write promotional content and to push your content to the audience, to the very wide audience. I thought it's just not modern anyway, that it's not useful enough. I thought that it's just maybe a bit too much in today's world, and it's not really getting very great results because it's just simply not useful enough. So traditional content marketing includes content creation, content distribution, and insights and analytics when you actually look through your results and like check out which type of content is working best for you and stuff like that. But actually, then you analyze your content in a more linear way. In this approach, like a more traditional approach to content marketing, I think everyone see this buyer's journey as going through your one piece of content to signing up for a free trial and then becoming a customer, which we all know is not really that easy. And I would prefer this approach of sorry, wait. Sorry guys. Of content experience when content is content experience can be seen as an experience of every piece of content across all of the devices, across all of the platforms, also some sales content, and seen as non-linear and holistic, not only seen as a performance of one article or only your blog post, but as a whole content that your brand is presenting to your audience. And first, as we're going for UX tips today for content marketers, I want to ask you if you ever notice that attractive people seem to be more funny, smarter, or just seem more likable. I bet yes. And it's actually the halo effect. So I want you to think as your blog as a person. So I know we live in a world, we want to think that appearance isn't that important, but actually it is very important. So first impression is crucial for you to attract users to really dig into your content, because I even notice myself if I don't like font, if it's something is not easy to read for me, or just like, I don't know, I don't like colors of the blog or something like that, I'm easily discouraged to dig into it. So I just sum up some of the few blog design tips for content marketers, which is, for example, content focused navigation, so that don't just list every possible topic and navigation that you think is right, but really focus on your user experience on so that you can keep your users in the blog, so that they can browse for more categories, they can read more of your content. Don't think of it as they come to your blog exactly to just to sign up for a trial and buy your products, and that's the goal. No, the goal of your blog is to engage your audience, is to educate them, so enable finding the right content, which they can do by great navigation, also useful blog post categories, easy to scan text, that's obvious, table of content, clear CTA, so that you don't give too many distractions, so your readers can really understand your what do you want them to do. And it's not always have to be sign up for a trial, but a CTA can be read another blog post which is related to this one, or check out our crazy video, or whatever other goal there may be. Also, when we talk about UX, it's important to make it really accessible for your audience. And for example, some people may not like reading a lot, or they have maybe some problems with reading. Then it's great to provide plugins for turning a blog post into a podcast, and they are actually really great. I tried them, and it can really feel like a podcast, not this strange Ivona voice or whatever, but a really nice feeling. Of course, there's gonna be some unnatural sentences like a title or headlines, but overall I think it's much better, and then you can it doesn't cost you any time, so it's just automatically, so I guess it's a win-win. Other than that, I think contrasting colors it's very important, and of course eliminate distractions. So don't put like a lot of pop-ups. Keep the design of your blog really clean, so that it's easy to read, and just focus on the experience. Now the great dilemma, what to focus on, if it's supposed to be SEO or UX. And actually they have some common practices, like fast loading page helps both UX and SEO, like titles, headlines, like responsive web design, and probably a few more, but I wanted to talk about controversial stuff here. And for me, it's I think this would be the short answer, which one to choose. Write for people and optimize for Google. So keep in mind that people are reading your content, not really Google. Of course, add optimization, but nowadays these algorithms are really also adjusted for users, so you don't have to be really strict about, like, you can adjust keywords, you can change the how it appears in the text. It doesn't have to be every, I don't know, 500 signs, or it doesn't have to be in any specific location. So you can really play with this. Of course, add your important keywords, and but usually when I write, it just comes along with writing. It just naturally appears. Keywords naturally appear in the blog post, because that's my topic. So is there even any other way? I don't know. But when it comes to UX tips, and especially as we gather here UX writers and people interested in UX writing, I think this beautiful cake also can improve our content. So maybe it will, these rules that text should be clear, concise, constructive, conversational, and consistent. It doesn't have to be maybe as literal as in UX writing or practices, but it still very well reflects the idea. So in content marketing, you can play a bit more, you can write longer text, you can you have to show your point of view, you have to show context, you have to tell the story behind your idea. So it can be it doesn't have to be straight to the point, like otherwise we wouldn't have blog posts, but just bullet points and that's it. But I think it's still it is still relevant to keep your blog posts very clear, constructive, and also conversational, as it can be. It doesn't have to be black and white. You can ask questions, you can start the conversation, you can maybe talk about something more interesting to inspire people to think about some problems and issues, and then continue this. So also add to your blog post, to your blog design, an option to comment or start this conversation or Medium or on other social media. And people go through your content to actually to get to know if they're gonna like your product, your service. So that's the actual goal, and they need to, your content needs to be aligned with your overall strategy and with your product. So it can be when a user goes through your content, it has to be adjusted to what users can expect from your product, and it has to be attractive, but also consistent. And you can see here how many on this slide, how many forms of content there are. It's not, when we say content, we usually think just blog posts or content for social media, but actually all of these things listed here is content. And of course it can have different emotions. It should have different emotions because it appears in different situations, but it's still, you can still use a chart voice to, I lost it again. Yeah, you can use a voice chart to really align your content and to use similar words, to use a similar energy in your content, to also use the same phrases as in the product. So then when your users come, when your readers become your users of your product, they won't be lost. They will feel familiar. They will already feel like they know your product, even though they haven't been using it before because of your content. And now I'm going to talk about, I don't know how much time I have, but I will still go. I wanted to debunk some myths about content marketing. First is that content should be easy to read for everyone. And we use Hemingway app usually to do that. For sure, everyone or almost everyone knows that tool, which shows you the score, how hard your text is to read or how easy. And it can help you like rephrase some long sentences and make it easier to read. But I think it's not true. So your content have to be easy to read for your audience, not for everyone on the planet, because then it just loses its value, and it has to be, it's hard to write, it's from my experience, it's hard to write for specific audience, like for example, for software house, when you use words like artificial intelligence, natural language processing and such in an easier way. I mean, there is no easy way to talk about certain things, and I think you just have to adjust it to your audience. Of course, try to make it sweet and short, but you can't always make it understandable for everyone. So don't really get fooled by these Yoast plugins, and don't blindly follow the rules like that, because it's all about users, not about SEO. Second one is that content is for SEO, and I already said that that's not true as well. It's for your users. It helps SEO a lot, and it's great that we can contribute to this, but you can't focus only on that. So for example, I have this tip that if you wanna write some like really basic text articles about including some crucial for your website keywords, you can create a topic cluster and just like publish it in some other way. It doesn't have to be on your blog, so don't push it like don't force it to your blog, because if you are on a daily basis, if you communicate to more experienced people, to some experts, and you have really great content, and then you push some basic content and just like guides for beginners on your blog, I don't think it fits there. So you can, but remember that you don't have to publish everything on your blog. There are other ways. You can just create a different section on your website and publish some basic content there, so that you can differentiate this content and make it more useful, so that your readers and experts who visit your blog don't have to just go through some ton of I don't know, like 10 or 20 basic articles that you wrote because suddenly you thought about SEO. No. And the third one, the blog post must be at least 1,600 words. I mean, yeah, in ideal world, but it doesn't have to be like that every time. And for all of content writers in the world that think that they text is not long enough, you are enough. And don't forget that the most important is value that you give. So just write the best possible content on the topic, but don't just push some useless words there just because you want to fill the gap. I think. Of course, there are some good practices, like instead of just rambling about your topic, if you don't have an idea, maybe ask some experts to share their quotes, maybe explain it in a better way, like more practical way. You can write some examples, and that will give you some more words, but these are gonna be very valuable words, not just some unimportant stuff. So yeah, I think that's enough. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed. And now I want to invite Kalina.
Yeah, I will share my screen. I'm not sure if okay, I can share my screen now. All right, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. And as you can see, I will talk about the relationship between psychology and UX writing. I will share a lot of like book recommendations and theories and stuff. So feel free to take screenshots of stuff that seems interesting to you. Feel free to ask questions on the chat, and I will answer all of them later. Yeah, so first a bit about myself. I am a content writer and strategist with, I think, for something years of experience, and currently working as a UX writer and also a bit of localization specialist from since like a couple of months. So Pieterjan's presentation was particularly interesting to me. And I am currently working for HCM Deck, a startup based in Krakow. And apart from all these things, I'm also a psychologist. I just I just like defended my master's thesis in psychology, so it's still like pretty fresh, and it gives me like, I think, a somehow unique perspective from the psychological point of view. So today I will talk about that perspective and how you can benefit from it. I will tell you a little bit about these theories, about concepts that I've learned about during my studies, ones that have that inspired me somehow, and I hope will also be inspiring for you. And I will start from the cognitive psychology, which I think has probably the most applications in UX writing, in UX design. And it's I think it's kind of like it's safe to say it started from the computer mind analogy, when the human brain is kind of described in the computer terms. Like you have the input part, then we process it. This is the part we'll be like particularly interested in. Then you get the output, and from the output you get the feedback, so you know what you can improve. And based on that approach, on the computer mind analogy, we get down to a concept of two systems of processing information. These systems come from Daniel Kahneman, a famous cognitive psychologist, and I will recommend his book later on, so you will be able to take notes and read it after, because it has a lot of interesting, like very inspiring insights. So like getting to the point, we have like two systems of processing information. And the system one is based on dopamine. This thing over there, this chemical like thing is dopamine. So it's like very automatic, very low effort, doesn't take too much energy. And we don't really want the users to like kind of like stay in the system one like mode. We don't want to activate the system two, the more complex one, too much, because it takes the frontal lobe. It takes a lot of like this computational power, a lot of effort, and it's like takes a lot of our RAM to stay in the like computer analogy. So we strive to focus on the simple way of processing the information, the system one, so we can let our brains rest and don't use too much energy. And this is like something to keep in mind as a designer, as a writer, as any person that works with that creates digital products. And now we get to the concept of cognitive load. Cognitive load is like something that is like actually the amount of work the brain needs to do. And here we have an example with two buttons. We have one button that's like kind of long, although conversational, so it might make sense in some cases, and it says like, yes, show me more. But if like the operation is particularly complex, in most cases it would make more sense to use the next version, something that's like just 4 letters, 1 word, and we don't need to ask the brain to process more information than actually needed. And then we get to this like question, how much is too much? And there are like some safe limits coming from research with users. This is according to Tori Podmajersky, the author of the book Strategic Writing for UX, which is not technically like a book about psychology, but she has really like interesting insights that are like deeply cognitively rooted. So anyway, like getting to the point, the safe limit is around 40 characters, 3 to 6 words, and keeping the copy, like product copy, between 40, let's say 70 characters, and up to 3 verses. Because more than that, when the users refer to it in user research, they call it the wall of text. They don't see like what's written in there. They just see like a chunk of text, and they don't really focus on the meaning. And we know that like sometimes it's kind of hard to keep it concise, but I think it's really worth to keep this limit in mind and to like do our best to fit in that. But on the other hand, it's also easy to overdo it. And here's where the Tesler's law, like another law that's kind of lesser known, I think, comes in. And the law states that for any system, there's like a certain amount of complexity that we can't reduce. So we get to the point when we can't make it any clearer, any simpler. And this conservation of complexity was discovered, not really invented, was discovered by Larry Tesler in mid-1980s. So that's quite some time ago. And he got to this and he stated that in most cases, an engineer should spend an extra week reducing the complexity of an application, which is like, well, in the perfect world, that would be great if it was like that. And like we all know how hard it might be to apply this rule like in real life. But I think this is also like from my perspective, this is this Tesla's law, this insight is what should convince you to design content first and to be a part of the design process from like a very early stage, because then it will be easier to avoid like this kind of problems. And another like strategy you can take to decrease the cognitive load is the progressive disclosure. And you can see like in this example from MailChimp on the left, like you don't have all this like text displayed at once, but when someone is interested, like let's say e-commerce and retail, they can click on it and expand the text to learn more. And there's even another step, they can click on learn more to learn even more. And it's also like this rule is also applied in tooltips. So this screenshot here is like straight from HCM Deck, the platform I work on. And there's, like you don't need to make the label like particularly long. Like you can just say what it is and describe it further in a tooltip. And this is what progressive disclosure looks like. And then we get to the reading list. So I've already mentioned two of these. First is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, which is like pretty thick, but definitely like worth reading even little by little, because like this is like what I would say it's one of the most classic positions in the list, like in the world of cognitive psychology. Then we have another cognitive psychologist, Steven Pinker, and he wrote The Sense of Style, which is like, yes, from the cognitive perspective, but it's very much about writing. And it also has like a lot of very interesting, very fresh insights about writing in general, not just UX writing. And of course, strategic writing for UX, which as some of you may know already is one of my favorite books, and I think is definitely worth the hype. So yeah, so that's it for cognitive psychology. And then we get to behavioral psychology, which is, well, still cognitive, because like behavioral psychology is like an older field, and now it's mostly like comes with behavioral and cognitive, like they go in pairs, because behavioral was focused on behavior and cognitive puts the perception in the picture. But there is still something to it. There is still something interesting in these theories. And one of my favorite models is the foggy behavior model, which may look quite complex, but it's actually quite simple. It describes how three factors, motivation, ability to do something, and prompts come together. And you need like a certain amount of these three factors in order for the behavior to take place. And let's have a look at an example. I think I once screenshotted this one from Masana, and I think it really shows how this model works in action. Like first we have motivation. So the motivation is like focus on the work that's most relevant to you. We describe the user's motivation. Then we have the ability part. The user knows what they're supposed to do, so that they just need to add an inbox filter, and it's like clearly stated over there. And we have a prompt, which is in the form of this message, a pop-up message when someone opens the software. And again, like when you're working on a copy that needs to be like very persuasive, needs to encourage an action, it's good to have like this little things somewhere like as a point of reference, and think about it and think about whether your copy meets all these criteria. And we get to social psychology, and social psychology is about many things, but most importantly, in our case, it's about persuasion. And this book, it's really a classic, and another one of the books that are often brought up when someone mentions social psychology. But even though it's old, I think it's still a really nice starting point, nice reference, this Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. And let's quickly go through, I mean, there are like many rules over there, but let's go through some of the most important ones when it comes to writing. First, we have social proof, which can be really powerful in the form of microcopy. And then you have some examples from Glassdoor and from Basecamp that you can like put just a tiny bit of text next to a button, and it can really increase your conversion or the user experience. And then we have something that's, I think, a bit lesser known, and it's called labor illusion. Well, I believe that people at Slack actually work on that, and it's not just an illusion. The idea is that when we kind of underline that, we stress that someone is working on something, the user is more likely to value it, and is more likely to get involved, to agree for something, like let's say for sending occasional service. And there comes the liking principle. So it's about humor, it's about like being witty, it's about giving like pop culture references, it's about being human. And all these like factors in UX writing, they adapt to the liking principle, and the liking principle eventually also makes our content more persuasive in the long run. And then last but not least, we have justification. And there is like this famous Xerox line study. Let's say like people were lining up to scan something, to make copies of some papers. And one group of people used a different line than the other. The first group just said that I have some pages and can I use the machine? And the other one was like, excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the machine because I have to make copies? And it's like pretty self-explanatory, but when you think about it, like obviously they wanted to make copies, no, they were there, but they explained it. So even though it didn't make much sense, it didn't add much to the picture, actually they were much more successful, because the success rate in the first case was 60%, while the other ones was 93%. So sometimes when you add the justification, even though it's pretty weak, but any justification, it may actually mean that you will be much more successful. And then we get to the ultimate thing, we get to empathy. And even though it may sound like pretty, I don't know, pretty cheesy, but well, it's actually true. So that's why I'm talking about it. The most important lesson I've learned from my studies, from my like education, is that like you're about the empathy, like the ability to put yourself into like someone's shoes, and realizing that I'm not my end user, and what seems like good to myself doesn't necessarily have to be good for the person on the other side. And something like a rule to live by, a rule to keep in mind, is that good UX copy is supposed to be inclusive. And then we get to the topic of neurodiversity. So neurodiversity may mean a lot of things. It may mean people who perceive stuff in a different way, people from the autism spectrum, or people with some, well, let's say with the dyslexia, or some other different ways of perceiving stuff. Well, and I could make it like another presentation. I would be like, I don't know, like 30 minutes about that, but let's just go through the most important stuff to keep in mind. Well, first of all, when it comes to metaphors, they can be nice and they can be witty and then can be human and funny, but it's actually quite risky to put them in the critical points, because like when someone is, let's say, on the autism spectrum, which is not an edge case because the spectrum is like pretty wide, they may not understand the metaphor, and it also may happen when English, let's say, is not the first language for someone. So the metaphor can be a killer instead of a winner. And of course, also as Nina mentioned, it's important to watch your contrast to make it readable, and to pay attention to your fonts. Like there are some fonts, there are a list of fonts that are like friendly for people, for like neurodiverse people, and they are like easy to read. And then we get, like, speaking of dyslexia, I really like showing this example because it allows you to like step into someone's shoes. I'm not dyslexic myself, so I would need someone to confirm, but apparently this is more or less how a dyslexic person sees the text. So the longer it is, the more complicated it is, the more of a nightmare it becomes. So this is also something to keep in mind. And then we get to the equality, to treating like all your like users equally. And first of all, like the most important #1 rule is that plain language is your friend, and you should like learn more about it in order to make your text more inclusive. And easier is more inclusive because there's something like called the FOG index, which tells you like how many years of education a user needs to finish in order to understand the text without too much effort. And obviously, like not everyone is like has like 20-something years of education. So the easier we make it, the more people we appeal to. And some of the rules I think are also not quite as popular, but are good practice to make your language more inclusive. Is to when you write in English, is to advocate for a singular they. Like if you don't know the gender of a person, it's perfectly fine to call them like he or she, but just use they. A singular they is perfectly correct, and it includes everyone. And also it's good to choose gender neutral nouns when you can. And they also included a list from the United Nations, so you can also make a screenshot, and you can just Google it. It's pretty easy to find, just to keep you inspired. Yeah, and also like in this case, it's also good to educate yourself about some of the issues you may not see at first, but they actually exist. And I can recommend these two books. The first book is technically wrong about about the tech world, about design. And the second one is about workplaces in general. It's called Better Allies. And apart from books, it's just like not everything is in the books, and the world is changing like super rapidly. So I think it's most important just to stay attentive, to listen, and to ask, to stay curious, and actually ask about what people would like to see and what they are missing. And if you want even more, there are like several websites. I will maybe paste them later in the chat if you would like to, but these URLs are pretty easy, so you can also like screenshot them. This website, these first free ones, Loso UX, Digital Psychology.io, and Growth Design Psychology they have all these like psychological laws described in a very like user-friendly and neat way. And another like thing that's rooted in psychology and serves as a useful point of reference is the 10 heuristics for user interface design by Jakob Nielsen. So many of you are probably already familiar with it, but you can find it on the internet and like to turn to when you're in doubt or just like need some guidance. All right, so I hope I made it in time, hopefully. And thanks a lot. If you would like to stay in touch, you can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram, or like wherever social media you would like to stay in touch. And it's my name and surname, so it's pretty easy to find. So yeah, I think that's it from my side. And I will need to stop sharing. Perfect. All right. Thank you. Thank you for coming and listening. Hope this was useful.
Wow, thank you so much, Kalina and Nina and Pieterjan. Super interesting presentations. And we haven't seen any questions actually in the chat, but we still have 15 minutes. So, okay, here is a question. Where can we find the recording? So we will post this recording for sure in the Facebook group, which is called UX Writers Krakow. It will also go on Making Waves YouTube channel. So yeah. If anyone else, if no one has any questions, then I'm happy to ask one myself, actually. What's the best advice that you get? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Maybe a little more specific, because that's quite a broad question.
Yeah. Okay, in the meantime, feel free to ask anything in the chat. I will. I thought I would ask Pieterjan actually. I was thinking about your slide with, you know, the one about figurative language, and you know, the recommendation is often, if we write a text that we know will be translated, then we should avoid any metaphors. We should make it as simple as possible. No cultural references, no proverbs, etc. So, doesn't that make the text really boring? And what can we do about that to to avoid that, basically? What do you think?
It's also, as I mentioned during the presentation, it's true, like, because those are the elements that make it fun, right? That actually provide this experience and really also give the product its particular voice. But that's why I think it's good to have a well-described brand voice that you can also communicate maybe to localization experts, and then they can do with it what they want, right? or you can give some extra notes when you send the text for translation, for example. But yeah, it's never going to be exactly the same, as translation never is, right? It's never 100% exactly the same, almost. So yeah, it is quite tricky. It's about finding a balance to make sure that there is still a bit of voice in there. It is still instructional and it's still useful, of course, because that's still the main goal of UX copy. But yeah, it also has to make sense in the target language.
Yeah, right. No, thank you. That's a really good answer. Right, so we did get some questions here. So first from Monica, what is the best advice that you got from others related to UX? It can be anything. So Pieterjan, Nina or Kalina, if either of you has anything in particular you can share here.
I think I have an idea. I mean, I got plenty of good advice, but I think one of the best pieces of advice I got was to focus on the process more, like when describing my experience, to focus not only on the outcome but also on the process, to think how to improve the process, the research, like all the stages of design. So this is something that I definitely wish I would have learned like earlier in the process.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think for me, a really useful thing was to start thinking more like a designer than a writer, which was also the challenge for me, I think, because I've been so focused on words until I discovered UX writing. So it's like, you know, combining design and words into one discipline. So we have another question. As a designer, can I jump into UX copy field? I think as a designer, you have a really good position to get into UX writing if you're interested in that. I think it's great both for designers who are interested in writing, as well as for other kinds of writers that are interested in design. So absolutely, and there are lots of material online you can find. A lot of it is free articles and free courses and other courses as well, for sure. Next one. Should we get more expertises in the fields of UX or UX writing, or maybe we should look for wide knowledge of all fields? So I guess the question is, should we focus on UX or UX writing, or look beyond that?
I think it goes together more or less, right? I mean, I was not that much. I didn't really deep dive into UX until I started reading more about UX writing. It goes hand in hand. I got fascinated by UX writing. I did a lot of reading and watched a lot of videos and webinars and stuff. And you just get to know all the UX concepts little by little, just by reading about this niche thing. You get to know the broader context. I mean, that is how I did it. Maybe the others, maybe Nina, Kalina, you have other experiences there. But I think there are many ways to get there, basically.
Yeah, I think so. I think like there are like many different starting points you can start from. Like some people they make the transition from technical writing, some go from marketing, from copywriting, from being a UX designer. Like there are like many points you can start from, and all of them like have their advantages. They're very like strong points. So I guess like there are like you can start from any point, and UX designer is like one of the best ones you can get.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think it's also really fascinating with UX writing how people come from all walks of life, and everyone brings something new to the profession. And you know, could be content marketing or translation or design or whatever. But that's a really nice thing about UX writing as well, that it's still quite a new field, a lot of potential.
Yeah, I also think that it not only works that way, that you can come from being a content marketer or any kind of writer to UX writer, but also like you can benefit from UX writing in any other area that you use words. So probably all of the fields. So even like, I mean, my presentation is probably my idea for that, or what I try to explain. And I think it could be also like applied in sales and I don't know, customer success team, because solving problems also has to be intuitive and fast and understandable and just useful. So I think that we can all benefit from UX writing in every possible part of business.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
That definitely has a point, and it also like reminded me of something, because I have some friends that are lawyers and they are like absolutely terrified by the language lawyers use, and they are like very interested in the subject of plain language and UX writing, all of these ideas. So there are like some let's say like industries that are like pretty unobvious, pretty unexpected, and they can also benefit from it.
Yeah, absolutely. So next one, could you give us some advices how to start a career in the UX writing field? Anyone feels like jumping in? My first advice would be I think I would go to uxwritinghub.com, and there is a lot of material and information there. A good starting point, I would say.
Yeah, that's one thing. It's also like largely depends on where you're coming from, because they're like the roads again, like they're always different depending on your starting point. So that's another thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also the books that have been published the past few years. I mean, there have been more and more books that have been coming out, and I mean, also the one you mentioned, Kalina, from Tori Podmajerski, that's a really good one. There's the microcopy book from Kinere Tifra, and many others. I mean, if you're into books, obviously. If you're not into the long form, then there are millions of Medium articles that you can look into.
Yeah, and maybe also remember that Wojtek offers UX writing courses for Polish people as well, in Poland. Next question. If Pieterjan teaches anywhere topics about UX and UI, online or offline?
I answered the question in the chat already. I just said I'm a mentor in the UX Writing Academy, or the UX Writing Hub. And their new course, the next course, is starting in 2 weeks, so you can sign up if you want to. It's a 4-month program. It's very intensive, but you're going to learn loads, and you're going to have a really nice portfolio piece, or a few pieces for your portfolio at the end of that. So have a look.
Yeah, we have a follow-up question here. Has Pieterjan a canal on YouTube platform or somewhere else? And
no.
when you have blog posts.
I have blog posts. Yeah, I have blog posts. Yeah, maybe find me on LinkedIn and I can share. I can share some things.
Yeah. Okay, we have 3 minutes left, so a couple more questions, and then Pieterjan will finish off the session. As far as I'm concerned, is UX generally more based in science, or is it really more about trial and error? That's a really good question.
I mean, isn't science also trial and error? If you like, strictly speaking, to some extent, of course. So, yeah, I don't know. It definitely is, but I mean, books have been written by very smart people who base themselves on proven theories in psychology and design and other fields. So I mean, we can assume that there is a source of truth. There's always going to be exceptions, I guess, but yeah, I don't. Yeah, go ahead, Kalina. Yeah, sorry.
It depends whom you ask, to be honest. Like some people are like more data driven, more like rooted in science, let's say. And this is like the approach I'm really I'm all for, and I'm like hoping to see more in the future, and I think I will. And I think there's also like a place to develop new methods to validate copy, because this is like, well, it's even younger than UX writing, and I think there's like still like a lot to be done in this field. So it's actually a really good question, because I think it's headed there, but we still need to work on it to make it more scientific, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but isn't that also the case that you can make some assumptions like based on previous researchers and some theory, but then you run your own research and then you find out on your target group what works for your brand, because no research is universal, right? So I guess that's also the point, that you can start with some background and then just learn your own users.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's very context specific.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We are running out of time, actually. So
Yes.
I think let's continue the discussion and the question, like in other places, maybe the Facebook group, for example, UX Writers Krakow. Yeah. So thank you so much, everyone who turned up. It was really nice, and I will hand over the last few minutes to Pieterjan.
Yeah, I mean, the last few minutes, it's not that I'd have so much to say anymore. I'm just going to quickly share my screen. So yeah, thanks everyone again for joining. This has been great. I think at the highlights now we are down to 36 participants. I see. I think we were 68 or something. So that is quite a big success, I would say. I'm very happy with that. So thanks a lot, and please join the Facebook group UX Writers Kraków if you haven't already. I would actually like to know, for those who are still here, where are you all from? Like based in other places in Poland? Because I mean, maybe we should rename the group to UX Writers Poland. So yeah, just to have an idea. I'm gonna have a look at the chat here. Poznań is represented as well. Katowice. Okay, maybe we should think about that. Stockholm. Okay, that's that's great. Oh wow. Switzerland, England, Gdańsk, Sopot, Torun. Yeah, I think we have an audience here. So please feel free to join. The Facebook group. And if you have ideas for our next meetup, please reach out to Anja or myself, or post something in the group. I'm sure somebody will react. Yeah, and I hope you all learned as much as I did today. I think we had some great presentations. So thanks to all of you, and thanks Anja for organizing, because you've really been the driving force here after this first meetup. So thanks a lot for that. And yeah, wish you all the best, and hope to hear you here and see you very soon. Bye bye.
Thank you. See you soon.
Thanks a lot.